Good morning, everyone. How is everyone? You okay? Yeah. You sure? Yeah, anyone hungover from last night? No? I'm a little bit tired. I'm not hungover, I'm not going to say I'm hungover. I'm very disappointed. Everyone's at the back. Why are you at the back? What's going on? Please come to the front. Be with me. Come on. I'm not going to make you do that, don't worry. I'm going to make you answer. You may notice that I'm one person short for this talk. This lovely person here. So Chris, unfortunately, this talk is all about self-care, but specifically how we're not very good at it in leadership. And Chris is currently going through some challenges of his own. And we had a long conversation and we felt it was best that he take the time for himself. So he's literally leading by example right now and taking that time for himself to get himself good. So before I start, can we just have a massive round of applause for Chris to say well done. Cool, okay, so let's get going. I am going to introduce Chris because he's a lovely guy anyway, even though he's not here. So I'm Stu Day. I'm the head of quality at Capital One. I've been in the industry for around 28 years, 18 of those in positions of leadership. Chris has been in the industry for around 7 years. Previous to that, he was in manufacturing, which is a completely different industry, culturally and from a leadership perspective. But he's been in 5 years in leadership from a tech and quality point of view. And we also have this podcast called Quality Talks. So anybody listen to the podcast? Anybody subscribe to the podcast? No? Yes, a couple of people. That means that this whole room can scan that QR code, it'll come up again at the end, and subscribe to the podcast. Amazing. But yeah, we talk about all sorts of things from quality, leadership, tech, anything, coaching. We cover so many different, we cover so many different topics on this podcast. We've got guests coming on, etc., etc. So, by all means, subscribe if you choose to. We've got a YouTube channel, we've also got a website called qualitytalks.co.uk. We've got a blog, lots of other content as well. So, first of all, can everybody stand up for me? So those tired people in the room, those on panels are like, oh God, what's he doing? Right. Okay. So everybody's standing up. Yeah, cool. So, I've got a question for you all. Whether you're in a position of leadership by title or not, how many of you have been so focused on being a great leader to others, you've essentially forgot about yourself? Stay standing up if that is the case. You can sit down if it's not the case, it's absolutely fine. Don't feel as though you have to stand up. Right, just take a moment to look around the room. Okay? So, all those still standing have been in that position before. I've been in that position before, so has Chris. And this is one of the reasons why we advocate for this topic so highly and so passionate about it. Because ultimately, you think you're doing the right thing by others, but you're not doing the right thing by yourself. And what we're going to talk about today is how we can be better at that. I'm not perfect at it, by no means. I still have issues, I still have challenges that I face on a day-to-day basis with my own well-being, my own mental health and those kind of things. But when you're put in a position of leadership, often that gets put to the back. So you can all sit down. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to make you stand up for the whole talk. So, what is the cost of neglecting our self-care, regardless of whether you're in leadership or not? And you'll see here from this little image, we can be smiling on the outside, but actually, inwardly, we're not okay. And that has mental and emotional effects. So things like physical and mental fatigue, increased stress and anxiety. I've suffered with anxiety since probably my late teens. And I still suffer with it now, badly. Often people will say, well, how can you stand up on stage and do this sort of thing when you suffer with anxiety? But actually for me, this is a great way of facing into that. I'd much rather be sat or stood facing you right now, looking at you all, looking back at me, than sat on that front row with you all looking at the back of my head. That makes me really uncomfortable, believe it or not. Low self-esteem, mood swings, irritability, all these things that can be impacted by us neglecting our self-care. But then there's also cognitive and behavioural effects. So these mental and emotional effects then impact our ability to concentrate. We become neglection of responsibility. So we'll say, I just don't feel like I'm not quite up to doing that right now. And you won't even necessarily be doing it consciously, subconsciously you'll be making those decisions because you can't mentally decompartmentalise everything that's going on. Physical and mental fatigue, unhealthy coping strategies, and there's that real sense of withdrawal from others. I just want to be on my own. And from a leadership perspective, we can't just be on our own, right? Because we are leading other people. So it makes it really difficult to actually put yourself into that position where you're focusing on your own self-care. And for me, being a leader for so many years, my focus has always been like, well, I need to take it all on my shoulders, right? I need to show strength through taking things on my shoulders, protecting my team from the not so good things that might happen. But we need to start redefining self-care. It's not a weakness, especially in leadership. So let's talk about self-indulgence versus self-care. We all like a little bit of self-indulgence sometimes. I'm sure we all do. I do. I mean, I bought these lovely trainers a few weeks ago. A bit of a self-indulgent purchase, I might say. Some people are probably looking, they're not lovely at all. I think they are. So, what's the difference then? And we want to sort of start expelling some myths, let's say. So, the difference between self-indulgence and self-care. When we're being self-indulgent, our focus is predominantly on immediate pleasure and gratification. So we say, oh, I'm going to buy this because it makes me feel good. Yeah? And in that moment, you feel great. Whereas self-care is all about long-term well-being and health. So it's about sustainability, right? We've had loads of talks over yesterday around, quality, AI, all this sort of stuff, and we use the word sustainability in the tech world a lot, right? But what about on our own bodies? What about on our own mental health? How do we sustain a good, healthy environment for ourselves internally? So the intent is often reactive, so it's driven by emotions or desire. Like I say, it's that moment of pleasure. Versus the self-care is proactive and aimed at improving our health and happiness over a period of time. We're not going to go from A to B really, really quickly. It's going to take time, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Some examples. So, overeating. I do love going out on a Friday evening and just indulging and like eating loads. My stomach doesn't, however, I'm just going to say. But in the moment, it's like, this is great. I've had a bad day, I'm going to go out and have a meal, or go out and have a drink with friends, or something like that. But long term, that's not sustainable. Whereas examples of self-care would be practicing mindfulness or meditation, and also connecting with other supportive people. The art of talking is so, so powerful, and it's why I'm here today sharing this message. So impact, as I say, may provide temporary reliefs or pleasure, but long term could have negative consequences if we overindulge. And then from a self-care perspective, it enhances, the idea is it enhances our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, but also increases productivity and happiness, right? And we were just having a talk down here before we brought around that about, being in that place where you're mentally you're in a better place, and that makes you more productive, that makes you want to do things more, etc. So, as leaders, people do what we model. So if we're not very good at self-care, guess what? Other people that we lead probably aren't going to be very good at self-care. They may think that, oh well, you're showing me the way, right? Therefore I can't take that time for my family. I can't even ask to take that time because my daughter's not very well, or because it's going to show weakness, or or whatever. And that's not necessarily the case. You've got to think about how we can lead by example. So in leadership roles, we talk about leading by example, leading through others all the time. But when it comes to self-care, the things that we can do for our teams, and we often do for our teams, is encouraging balance for others. You say, okay, so it's okay. If you need time, if you need balance, it's absolutely okay. Saying no respectfully. So I would feel incredibly sad if people didn't feel that they could say no to me as a leader. But do it in a respectful way, obviously. And it's the same thing from a position of leadership. I should feel as though I can say no to my leaders, right? And so on. Protecting people's time off. So having people working at weekends, or not even having them work at weekends, i.e. encouraging it, discouraging is what we should be doing. I've had conversations with people recently where I've had, how was your weekend? Well, yeah, it was good. I did a little bit of work, but it was good. This doesn't sound good to me. I mean, if you're okay with that, then that's fine, if that's what you enjoy doing. But I discourage you to be doing any work at the weekend. That's time for you, right? But we've also got to be mindful that they may enjoy it, but it shouldn't be an expectation, right? They do it because they want to, rather than they do it because they feel as though they have to. Same thing in the evenings, right? But the biggest thing that we can do, leading by example, is show our own vulnerability as leaders. Don't just allow these things, demonstrate them to everyone. Because that way, people then realise that he's genuinely okay. There isn't that doubt in their mind. Chris gave an amazing talk a few weeks ago at Ministry Testing Meetup in London, all around vulnerability being a superpower when it comes to public speaking. And we talked about this. This kind of looks like Chris, actually, I have to say. He created this image, or he created it in his own vision. But vulnerability is a huge superpower. If you can be vulnerable in any situation, but especially as a leader, you will be amazed at how different doors, different communication channels can open up. And it's not about being perfect in any way, it's about being real. Sharing your challenges with people. I'm up here sharing with you people I don't know, some people I do know, that I struggle with my mental health. I struggle with anxiety. Yeah? And it's okay. You might see it out of my hat. Those people who saw me walking around in this crazy hat yesterday might have thought, what the hell was that hat about? Now you know what the hat's about. And my lovely t-shirt here as well. It's not a weakness, and that's something we have to remember. So how do we then go through and build this culture where it is okay for leaders to model these behaviours safely? What can we do to actually support our leaders better? And I'm talking about anybody in this room that is a leader of leaders, but also bear in mind that regardless of whether your title says you're a leader, you're all leaders, right? You'll work in teams with your peers, and those peers will be looking at you on a day-to-day basis. And guess what? The behaviours that you model will also be reflective of the behaviours they will start to model. Because if one person's doing it in the team, somebody else thinks, well, maybe I better work weekends as well. Because if I'm not working weekends, it might have a bad on me. You know, thinking about those things. But from a leader perspective, we need more support. We need to understand that it is okay to be vulnerable. We need to understand that it is okay to take the time we need, when we need it, to help ourselves. We don't want to be on the burnout spectrum. I've almost been there a few years ago. It's not a nice place to be. So what can we do? We can start thinking about providing more flexibility and supportive policies that encourage leaders to promote this type of thinking, promote this sort of type of behaviour. We can provide mental health resources and training. So I've done mental health first aider training. It's the most amazing training course I've ever been on because it really opened my eyes up to a lot of things. Had me crying, had lots of people in the room crying, but the actual training itself just opened my mind and actually made me realise a lot about myself that I didn't know at the time. But there's not enough of it. Only certain people can get to go on these types of training, but why don't we have all leaders going on this training? Leadership check-ins. How many of you have leadership teams or peers in your leadership group that check in with each other and say, how are you doing? Are you okay? Put your hands up if you do that. That's great to see. That needs to be done more and more and more. I have a stand-up every day with my leadership team. I've done it for many years, not just in co-op, I've done it. And often, we just talk, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Is there anything we can, do you need any support with anything? And guess what, they'd be asking me the same thing. Right? So we're actually supporting each other, and it's a great way of doing that. But also from a peer's perspective, if I'm in a head of role, who are the other heads of that potentially may be struggling in their day-to-day, and we can just check in and make sure we're having that time together. So creating these check-ins from a leadership team perspective, and it doesn't have to be about work. In fact, don't make it about work at all, in the sense of, how's the delivery going? Are we on target? Bin that stuff off for a second. How are you doing? How was your weekend? Do you need any support with anything? Self-care training for leaders. This doesn't exist as far as I'm aware. There's lots of leadership training. Here's a way to do a one-to-one. Know how to do a great one-to-one, 10-10 as we call them at Capital One. It was really confusing when I started. I was like, what's a 10-10? Because there's a company called 10-10 here, and I was like, but the actual self-care training doesn't exist, and that's something that we really, really need more of. Do I know how we get there with that? No, but I'm going to be looking into it more over coming months and years to figure that one out. And then finally, creating support networks. We've got a great community in the QA world, in the quality world, software testing. That obviously we're all supporting each other in roles, etc. The community, we've got loads of meetups. But what about creating support networks for leaders? And thinking about how we can support each other outside of work. And that's again something that me and Chris are really keen on creating. If you know of any, also, please share them. Please share them around. Because being able to be with like-minded people, maybe going through the same types of challenges as you are, helps you realise that you're not the only person. And often that's the biggest thing. You could be sat there thinking, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to show any signs of weakness because I'm a leader, etc., etc. And I'm going to throw it out there, and actually this is more prominent in males as well. Right? You all know males aren't very good at actually expressing their feelings. Just ask my wife. And actually don't ask my wife because she'll talk to you for hours about how poor I've been over the years. But we need to be better. So having support networks is something else that me and Chris are very keen on thinking about how we create this and potentially going to set one up. So what are micro self-care behaviours? So if you think about how we build software, and we talk about monolith systems, waterfall delivery, and then switching to agile and agility scalability and all this great stuff, building smaller stuff, getting it out quicker, or the releasing continuous deployments with small chunks of code, and then ultimately it creates this wonderful, amazing product at the end. Think about this as your body, your mental state is that product, right? And you can do these small micro behaviours to create the perfect, or good, let's say, product out the back of it, which is you, right? And you can encourage others to do the same. So things like social connection, that's what we're doing here, right? It's good, it feels good. It feels good to me anyway. Take 5 minutes, breathing reset. How many of us just stop in a moment and breathe? We go through every single day breathing, right? You don't realise you're doing it. And if you don't breathe, guess what happens? Right? But actually just taking a moment to really breathe, really focus on what that is. You'll be amazed at how it just calms in a situation where you think it's getting too much. Just breathe. My son, over his younger years, would be he would react to things emotionally if there was changes to his routine or anything like that, and he'd get really anxious and stuff. So we started giving him a 5-minute warning for anything. So 5 minutes, this is going to happen. So gave him time to just, okay. Simple thing, just put it. Screen-free lunches. How many people have screen-free lunches? Amazing. I wish I was better at it. It's an area where I'm not too great. Especially when I'm in the office. I'm better when I'm at home, but when I'm in the office, I generally not very good at having screen-free lunches. It makes a big difference. Setting boundaries. So things like, at 5 o'clock, the laptop shuts. Right? The amount of time I run workshops with people and they bring their laptops, and as soon as we have a break, the laptop opens and they're working, and then the laptop shuts. And I actively say no. In some cases, I've taken the laptops away because they don't need them, and I put them on the other side of the room. The shock horror. You're taking my laptop. It's like I'm taking a child. Creative expression, so things like music, drawing, just sketchnoting, things like that. Just anything to kind of reconnect with yourself and take you out of the moment. But there's more. Things like exercise, obviously, gratitude practice, thinking about what to be grateful for at the end of the week, acts of kindness to yourself, talking to others, but also talking to yourself. And then unstructured rest and self-reflection, so things like journaling are really good. So what tools can help? Anybody heard of the stress bucket? Cool, so a couple of people have heard of it. Excellent, which means many people haven't, which means you're learning something right now. So the stress bucket is a technique. I'm running a workshop later this morning where we're going to be covering one of these techniques, but this will be a secondary one that we will hopefully, if we get time, we'll try. But ultimately, the stress bucket is as simple as this image. And you can have this image printed in front of you, or you can even draw it if you like drawing, right? And you sit there and you think about what are all the things that are causing you some sort of stress. It can be minimal stress, it can be huge stress. And you write them, or you put them on post-it notes in the bucket, right? And then you think about what are the things that help me relieve that stress, kind of like what we were saying there about the micro behaviours. What are the things that I enjoy? What are the things that I find impactful? And you can plot them there. But you can do this with yourself, you can do this with your teams. Now the thing to remember is that our bodies are the bucket. Yeah? If we've got lots and lots of stress going on in our lives, some of that will be work, right? Doesn't matter how good at coping with stress you are, at a point, there will be a switch. And it could be for the most stupid thing. And you'll be like, why am I reacting like that? Normally I'm okay with this. But in that moment, that's the thing that tips you over. That's the thing that makes your bucket overflow. Yeah? So this is a great way of kind of like reconnecting with yourself and actually being open and honest. And you can do this with yourself, by yourself, with your teams, etc. The zone model, so this is actually a model I created. I did a coaching team, ICF team coaching program a couple of years ago now, and me and one of the other coaches on the cohort, we came up with this model to drive conversation. Essentially, just to drive conversation within our teams. But this is a great way to actually look at it from a healthcare, self-care and mental well-being, physical well-being perspective. And this is what we're going to do in the workshop later, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's a really great way of saying, if this was to happen, where does that put you? Right? Or reflect and say, this happened over this week, which zone was I in during the week? At the start of the week, at the end of the week, what were the things that sent me into that zone, that kind of thing. It's all about self-reflection. But this, for me, is one of the most powerful things. If you can get your peers to hold you accountable, right? That's one of the best things you can possibly do. So, I was really bad. I used to go on holiday, I used to take my phone with me, I used to be on Slack, I used to go on email. And to the point where my peers started holding me accountable. And basically, in the nicest possible way, telling me to bugger off and enjoy your holiday. And sometimes that's what you need, right? They're like, Stu, we got it. So I know you've got it. Is everything all right? Yeah. Piss off, basically. That, for me, if you've got peers that will hold you accountable, but also your teams hold you accountable, that's really powerful. So I've got a call to action for you all. We talked about these micro self-care behaviours. Which ones of these are you going to take, or which one of these are you going to take away today? Have a think about it, and have a chat in the break with people about it. And think about what self-care micro behaviours you're going to take away. You might find that other people are thinking about the same thing. Great, you can have a chat about it. Right? What can you do? So what sort of boundaries can you set? I said about the laptop sharing, there's loads of others. But don't forget to be vulnerable, because it is your superpower. Right? You'll be amazed at the difference it can make by being vulnerable in the moment. And just telling people that, do you know what, actually guys, I'm not okay. I'm just not okay. And that's why Chris isn't here. Because we had that conversation. And he said, do you know what, Stu? I'm not okay. And I'm getting a bit upset with it. But anyway. Some takeaway quotes for you all. Right? Don't know who these people are. We ChatGPT'd it. This is a tech conference. We thought we'd use tech. Right? But you may see, anybody on this side you may not see. There's a lovely quote down the bottom there by one Chris Henderson. Right? Time is one thing in life that we can't make more of. Remember to appreciate it for yourself. But these are some wonderful quotes here to just take away and think about. Loving yourself isn't vanity, it's sanity. Here's a great one. Who's ever worked in a service desk? Or spoken to the service desk and say, have you tried rebooting it? Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including yourself. Who knew the service desk had the most powerful message for self-care? Zen, like Anna Mott. So, I'm going to leave you with that. If you want to scan that code for the podcast, please do. We've got episodes where we talk more about this. We've got episodes where we talk about leadership in general and so many other things. But do please subscribe. Do connect with me on LinkedIn. Connect with Chris. And yeah, we have guests on the podcast. So if you ever just want to come on and talk about your story, then you're more than welcome. We create this place. Our platform is your platform. So if you need a voice, use our platform for it. Okay? Thank you very much for listening. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
My hearing's not quite that bad, so you just want to get your steps in, okay?
Thank you. Yeah, great talk, thank you very much. I actually found a useful book was Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. That was what I had as a result of like a transient ischemic attack actually. And that's part of my rehabilitation there. But the question I'd have to you would be, what would be the biggest challenge that you have faced in your own self-care?
Yeah, there's been many, I have to say. I think the biggest challenge for myself has been being emotionally aware that I'm struggling. And actually understanding and learning what my triggers are for that. But not just what my triggers are, but how I then respond to those triggers. One day, something will trigger me, but I'm cool. Another day, it will trigger me. It's the exact same thing, but I respond differently. Now, in my head, I'm kind of thinking, something is probably not quite right there. So it's starting to sort of build that emotional awareness about those things in different moments. And it could be just a build-up of stuff over a week, but then I don't quite react in the same way for that same thing as I would if I had a more chill week, maybe. I'm able to cope with that. So I think for me, it's building my emotional awareness around that, and really sort of tapping inwardly to those sort of things. As I say, I've suffered with anxiety for many, many years, and still do today. But I'm more self-aware of it, and I'm more open to admit it. And that in itself helps. So yeah, that would be good. Thank you. Any other questions? Look at that back in case somebody else is scared.
Yeah, so again, great talk, thank you very much, really resonated. Just one of the things though, in my experience, is that these type of behaviours and the way that people work sort of model from the top down. So if you have senior leadership, as an example of sweat in the office, that behaviour seems to ripple down. So if you have senior leadership that don't talk about it, just talks about, that doesn't always ripple down. How do you change the culture from a bottom-up approach to do what you just talked about?
Yeah, it's exactly that, and this is what we're saying about leaders of leaders of leaders of leaders, right? And modelling that behaviour. So one of the things to think about, and we see this often, and we always talk about cultures of quality and how we change those, and often it's like all starts small, right? You start living it in your team. Even if you're not getting that same sort of leadership, you start being the person that starts creating that environment for others and talking to your peers, and over time you can start just naturally, building that out. But also, I don't have a definitive answer to the question, but this is why we're talking about how do we set up more awareness, build more awareness, create support networks. Coming to events like this and doing talks like this, right? We talk about technology all the time. There's nothing more complex than the human body, right, and our brains, right? So why don't we treat it in the same way from a quality perspective as we do our software? Exactly. Thank you, yeah. So I think it's, there's no definitive answer. You can try sort of just doing little micro behaviours like within your teams and just building that up and making sure that's okay. Have conversations with your leader, and just go away, share this talk. We're recording it. We'll put it out there. Get them to go to the podcast. We'll talk. Bring them on the podcast. Whatever. We'll have an open conversation with them about it. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Yeah. I love this because it's make people being vulnerable. This is exactly what it is, right? It's your superpower.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk, very, very helpful. And my name is Julius Forsten. I think we met before, but I was really interested in learning more about the mental health first aid that you mentioned. If you can share and recommend, that would be really awesome. But I want to ask, what would you, if there was one takeaway from your experience in attending these Thursday courses, what would be your biggest takeaway from those?
Well, it says on my hat.
And that's another question I have, is what your hat represents.
What it says on my hat, which is it is okay not to be okay. But actually, not just wearing a hat, but modelling that as well. And I will say this story, it's funny. But on the training, we were in the midst of talking about this exact topic. Right? It is okay to not be okay, and you hear it a lot. And you should always have empathy for others because you don't know what they're going through, right? In the moment, somebody may be acting what you might say as a dick, right? Excuse the language. This is how it was represented in the training, it really is. But what's going on behind the scenes, right? You think about it like software again. Oh, there's this crazy thing happening on the UI. But it's not actually happening on the UI, it's beneath that's causing the problem. Why is this application running really slow? It's what's beneath it that's running. So that for me is what the biggest takeaway was. The other part to that was that sometimes people are just dicks as well. But it really resonated with me in terms of, and we sat there, because Chris was on the same training, and we sat there, and there was that moment of like, do you know what actually it is? Again, comic timing, perfect. So that for me is really good. And the more ways we can represent it, I'm walking around in a bright green hat, had it made especially in Mexico, big ovens. Just, t-shirts, whatever we can do to just get the word out there. So that would be it for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Stu. What are your thoughts on mental health days, and I guess how often might you need to take them? What if your leader doesn't really support them? Kind of what's your view on all of that sort of stuff?
That's not a planting question, that's a really good one. Me and Chris were actually, when we were creating these slides, we were talking about self-care days. And I'm a supporter of the concept of self-care days. What I'm not a supporter of necessarily is them being on this Friday of this month, you'll get a self-care day. But what if I don't need it on that Friday of that month? So building a level of flexibility into those days, should be there. But if you need, it's the same thing, really. In terms of if you're physically ill, you don't work. You take the time off, you to get better. If you're struggling mentally, it's no different. In fact, it's worse. Because that causes physical issues, right? But it starts with you being able to be honest about it and actually be self-aware that it's happening in the first place. So if any of my team ever came to me, or I was seeing the signs, I felt that they were struggling, and this is where you need to know your teams, and people need to know you, for peer accountability, you can then approach them and say, are you okay? I think you need some time. Yeah? But I'm a massive advocate for them, I think they should be there, but I don't think there should be a moment in time every 3 months to say, we're all going to have a self-care day, because you might not need it in that moment. It's great, but generally what will happen is you'll go and do self-indulgence rather than self-care. Self-care is something, it's not a day every 3 months. Self-care is something you do daily, and that's something to think about. Yeah, and it could mean you need some time off to get into that habit.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll hold the silence. Take a moment for me and breathe. Just breathe. Feels good, right? Don't get to do that very often. Right, thank you very much everyone, I really appreciate it.